Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat teaching by Rabbi Rebecca Schatz.
One thing that I noticed when looking at this Parashat, it's Parashat Shlach Lecha, or some people say it's Parashat Shlach, some people say, isn't it Shlach Lecha? Sure, it's the one that comes after Bahalecha. And this is, what? Easy for me to say, yeah. I made fun of, lovingly, the B'nai Mitzvah boys today because they could not say Behalotcha. And so I had to kind of get them through it. They read their Torah beautifully, but it is a very hard parsha to say. Anyway, so Shlach Lecha is a little bit easier. But there are two things that happen in this parsha that are probably known to you, but I had never put them together as potentially playing one into the other. So what's the first thing that happens in this parsha that people know about?
Sending the spies.
Yeah, sending the spies. Right, and what's the second thing? Okay, if you don't know. Tzitzi. It's where we get tzitzit.
Oh, yes.
And so this idea of the spies being sent in to see the land and then wearing garments that are supposed to be reminders visually for us of the mitzvot was a very interesting connection. So we're going to make that connection even more today, and hopefully that is an interesting. Oh well, I got one fan.
You have two fans.
Two fans.
This
wow.
is one of my favorite things. I'll keep my mouth shut.
Two fans.
I came across a teaching we did this afternoon. It was on the theme of, the blind man in the dark lantern.
Yes.
So you seem to have
a theme.
thread going.
Yeah. So
Do we have more?
I definitely don't have enough copies because I didn't expect this many people. So thank you all for being here. And there's an extra one over here. Does anybody need one? Anybody not get one? Or you get one? You guys can go.
I read ahead and ruin your presentation.
Do you want this? Do you want it? Yeah. Okay.
I learned
Yeah, sure. You guys can-
this with Rabbi Rembam years ago, and I will keep my mouth shut.
No, you can. I mean,
No.
I'm sure that he and I will say similar and also different things. So that's probably fine. So AJ was just commenting on the fact that I wrote the Taste of Torah this past week. Also, I'm the only TBA rabbi in LA right now. So anything that you received this past week having to do with Shabbat probably came from me. So I'm sorry. But I wrote the Taste of Torah, and there was a story that I used in that Taste of Torah about a blind man who lights the lamps for the town, and this idea that there is some kind of beauty and not necessarily using that light for yourself, but allowing others to be able to see. So AJ was just saying there's a nice connection there, which I had not thought about. But the reason that story is brought up is because in this past week's Parsha, which we read this morning, the idea of the menorah and what is the menorah doing at the front of the tabernacle. So, okay, we're going to jump right in. I'm going to read all the different sources as opposed to calling on people to read so that we can make sure that that people on Zoom can hear. But we're in Numbers chapter 13, verse 17, and I'm going to go until verse 21. So it says here, and I'm going to read some in Hebrew, some in English. If you have the sheet in front of you, you'll see that I made sure to print these in color because I wanted you to see that there were words that are repeated in these two different narratives, right? One having to do with the spies, and the other one having to do with tzitzit, and different verbs are going to be used for seen in both places that are mirrored. Okay, so in Bamidbar Yud Gimel says, Vaishlach otam Moshe. So Moshe sent them out, Latur et Eretz Canaan. So, by the way, the word Latur means to tour, literally. It doesn't actually mean to scout, which is what the word is that we use in colloquially when we're translating, and the word that you see here from Sefaria. But it actually means to tour. It's like the easiest word to learn in Hebrew because it means the same thing in English. So they were just supposed tour the land. Now, if you've toured any land, right, if you've gone to, I don't know, Italy, and you've toured Italy, you're not necessarily there to scout out the land, right? You're not there to spy on anything. You're there to enjoy and to experience. And that's really what we call then scouts later on, were there to do. They were just there to experience the land, to tour the land. Vayomer alehem, alu ze b'negev, alitem et hahar. Go up there into the Negev, sorry, there's a typo, and on into the hill country, and uritem et haaretz mahi, and you're gonna see what is this land. Right? What is it? What are you seeing there? So re'item is you will see, right? And what that is getting at is less of this touring aspect and now more of the scouting aspect. So there's a reason for you to see, not just to experience, but now there's actually something to see, a reason for the seeing. Now I'm just going to go straight into the English because the words that I want to point out are done for this piece of text. Are the people who dwell in it strong or weak, few or many, right? You have tasks. When you go into this land and you're going to see what's there, what are you seeing? What are you experiencing? Is the country in which they dwell good or bad? Are the towns they live in open or fortified? Is the soil rich or poor, meaning good to plant in or not? Poor is probably not the right English word there. Is it wooded or not? And take pains to bring back some of the fruit of the land. So make sure to look around, see what you can see, who are the people, what do they have there? If we were to come in, which is what this is all getting at, what would be good for us, what would be difficult for us, and make sure that, it might take a little bit of work, but make sure that you bring back some fruit. Now, it happened to be the season of the first ripe grapes. They went up and they scouted the land from the wilderness of Tzin to Rehov at Levo Hamat. Okay. So what is actually happening here? What are these tourists, what are these scouts doing in this land?
Oh, that's a question.
Yeah, that is a question.
They're looking how they're gonna conquer it. They're trying to figure out why you're gonna ask if the city fortified or not.
Okay, great. So one of the questions in here is very clear that there is an agenda to potentially conquer the land at some point, right? So the idea of, is it fortified or is it free, right? Is it swampland or is it built up? What else is happening? Yeah.
I guess they're just surveying the land to see what they can do with it?
Yeah, they're surveying the land to again, right, have this agenda of what could we do with this land. What does this remind you of? It's not a trick question. There's a lot of things this could remind you of.
I mean, immediately thought of Thomas Jefferson sending out people to literally try to get to the Pacific.
Great, so Thomas Jefferson sending out people to get to the Pacific, or figure out a way to get to the Pacific? Others?
Buying property, investing.
Okay, great. A modern day example, buying property or investing in property and scouting out, right, that property to see if it's good to invest in. What else?
It seems like they're just seeing the land is livable.
If the land is, right, but what does that remind you of, right? The land being livable. What else in our history can you think of where we've done this?
State of Israel.
Great. The state of Israel, right? That is obviously a part of our history that is told in many different ways as to how that scouting, how that touring happened. But yes, there was definitely a time in which people went into the land that we now call Israel and figured out what were the places that we could then come to and make our homeland. Columbus, anybody? Right, just like the general idea. None of these are wonderful stories, right? I'm not trying to say that like we should be so proud that we also did this back in our day in certain areas, but this is what people had to do when they, right, I'm thinking back to, obviously not 100% historically, but when we were kids watching the movie Pocahontas, right? And you see how they show up on the shores and they're all looking around to see what that land looks like and is there gold and is there not gold. Obviously not, as I mentioned before, not historically accurate to the actual story, just a Disney rendition. But that is, when you read through this, that you can imagine them like coming up in their boats and being all, strong and whatnot, and showing up to see what that land's gonna look like so they can then take it over.
Just
Yeah,
a point of reference.
yeah.
Almost none of us were kids when the Pocahontas
Okay, good
came out.
point. I wasn't kidding. When Pocahontas came out. I won't tell you how young I was, but I was a child. You all watched it with your children. Okay. Thank you. That was a very important point of reference. I thought you were probably something like historic about Pocahontas. Okay. So
I didn't understand the connection between, you were talking about Columbus and then you said Pocahontas, and I'm like, wait a minute.
I'm just saying that when you think about stories that have been told about land being conquered,
Okay.
or people coming to land.
You weren't thinking simultaneously, were you?
No. I was just giving another example. Yeah, thank
I was
you.
worried about your history class.
Yeah. I'm not that confused about my
The
history.
real question
Yeah.
is why would Moses send people to do anything when God is going to provide, and then as a good organizer knows, you never ask the question unless you know the answer. So it's like anything else, but I'm just like throwing that out just for food for.
Well, hold on one second. Let me just repeat it so people can hear. So Urban mentioning, first of all, the I guess meta question to ask is why did we have to do this in the first place if God already knows, right? If God can already see in, God already knows. Why send Moshe and then these tourists into the land to be able to do this for Moshe, for God, if the answer is already there? And why ask the question if you already know the answer? Alan, then.
Well, it's one of the reasons, this question has been asked before, and the rabbis say, well, that's why it says, Shlach lecha, take for yourself.
Right. Well, send for yourself, yeah.
Yeah, send for yourself.
Yeah.
Send for yourself. In other words, yes, Lynn, but if you feel more comfortable sending out the spies or sending out people to check it out, because some to hate, go ahead and do it. But it's not, because otherwise you could just say, Shlach, if it was a commandment directly from God that you had to do it, what is Lecha doing there? So this is like God, according to one,
Right, so what Alan's pointing out is that it's the idea, we actually don't read, I didn't bring this verse for us to read, but this idea of Shlach Lecha, similar to Lech Lecha, right, is that you're doing it for yourself. You're not actually doing it for God, even if God is kind of the impetus behind doing the sending, you're doing it, Moshe in this case is doing it for Moshe's Sandra.
I was just gonna say, you need the people's buy-in.
Great.
The people on the ground are the ones who are going to be doing the conquering, doing the settling, doing whatever. You need their buy-in, and
Right.
this is how you get their buy-in. Well, that was the thought.
The hope, right. So the hope would be that we would get the people's buy-in to really, on both sides, right? Actually, the people's buy-in who were doing the touring, and then potentially even the people's, maybe it's not called buy-in on that side of things, but understanding of what might be coming towards them and how it could be either beneficial or at least not completely catastrophic. But for these scouts to know that they're part of the process, right? When we're teaching a class, we like our students to get to the same idea that we had for the lesson plan, because if they feel ownership over it, then there's a better chance that they're going to get to it. Whereas if we just say, this is what you're going to do, there's a better chance that they're not going to end up doing what we expect them to. Did you want to
I was
follow
going
up?
to say, and the people, not the people
Right.
when they come back, the whole Am Yisrael.
Great. So the whole nation, when they return, to feel like they had, even if they were not the exact ones, that they had some of their feelers, so to speak, in the process.
And some agency.
Some agency, exactly. That's a great word for this.
That didn't really happen.
It does not really happen, but that's a spoiler alert. Okay, so now we're gonna skip a few chapters ahead, and so that's one story. We're not getting into the depths of that story, but just so that you can kind of see the beginnings of that story, because that's where these words are first used. So latur and ureitem are the two words that we're going to be focusing on when we get to this next passage, which is all about tzitzit. And when I start to read it, you're going to know exactly the passage that I'm referring to, because we say it 3 times a day. Okay. So God says to Moshe to say to the people, speak to Bnei Israel, and you should say to them, put on tzitzit, or really make for them tzitzit. make for themselves, right? They should make for themselves tzitzit. Now, just a fun question, I can't think of what the term is called. What are tzitzit?
Fringes.
But what are tzitzit?
They're wrapped around.
Right.
And then knotted in a particular way.
Okay, so they're not the tallis, right? The tallis, do I have a visual here? No. The tallis is okay, by the time you get it out, I'll be done with the sentence. The tallis is the garment itself. The tzitzit are the actual mitzvah, right? Think back in the day to garments that were worn. Most people were wearing tunics. And so most people had 4 cornered garments. There was not this need to create a tallis. You just put tzitzit on your garments. So when they said, make for yourself tzitzit, it wasn't like, oh, let me go get some fabric, let me get an atara, let me put this whole thing together. It was just, let me tie tzitzit on my garment. And that's gonna be this reminder for mitzvot. So, al kanfei b'gedehem, I just gave that away, on the corners of your garments, of your clothes, literally. Ledorotam v'natzu al tzitzit hakanaf b'til techelet. Okay, this is just telling you what and colors, etc. V'haya lachem letzitzit uritem oto. So, if you've ever heard Josh Rashowski talk about how he wears tzitzit, he wears a talit katan underneath his shirt, and he only has one little string that sticks out. Now you'll all notice that when you see Josh next. But it's because it says uritem oto. It doesn't say otam. It says you're only gonna see one of them. He can talk to you more about that. But the reason I have it highlighted here is because the scouts were told to ureitem also. Right? They were told to see the land, to see what was there, who were the people, what was going on, etc., etc. When we are talking about tzitzit being on our garments, you're supposed to have these tzitzit to see them, to see it, literally. Okay? Uzkartem ekol mitzvot Adonai v'asitem otam. So you're going to remember all of the mitzvot that God made for you. Velo taturu. Okay, what does lo taturu mean in this particular case? There's a lo before it, so do not.
Follow your heart.
Okay, maybe follow. Remember that tour before meant to tour.
Not go astray.
Okay, so the lo taturu, don't scout out, right? Don't do anything that's going to go deeply, basically. Acharei levavchem. So it's interesting because in the English here, it says, so that you do not follow your heart and eyes and your lustful urge, right? It's taking something that could be really beautiful, right, and seeing the tzitzit, and it's saying, I don't want you to follow urges that you might have. So when you see these tzitzit, hopefully it'll negate that and you'll go towards the mitzvot and not the bad things you could possibly do. It's like a double negative in the most confusing of ways, right? Not written that way, but just conceptually. When you see the tzitzit, you're not supposed to follow the things that you might have thought about if you weren't wearing the tzitzit. Everybody with me? So the way that scouting or touring is being used here is that it's something you should not want to do, and that the tzitzit should be a reminder not to do it. And yet, when we have the scouting beforehand, it's supposed to be this thing that was really beautiful, at least for us to acquire land in such a way that we would know what we were coming into. So the word is being used in very opposite ways, but for the same kind of action. Any thoughts on that? Does everybody recognize this passage?
I do.
Okay. Okay.
What does zonim mean, the word itself?
Zonim. I mean, like a zona is like, yeah, so that's what it means.
Okay.
Yeah. So something that would be, I mean, they're saying lustful here, but something
I
that
was
would.
gonna say, this is terrible translation.
Yeah,
If you're looking literal.
Well, it's just making it make more sense in English. If you read it in the Hebrew, you would have to add in.
I have a thought to throw out.
Yeah.
Why God asked them to do that at this point, and that would be that forecasted that they would see the giants and seal that, but they would have something to remind them that God's going to take care of them.
That's nice. So maybe to make sure that they weren't going to go against these urges that they might have that would go against the mitzvah that they were given. That's interesting. Yes, I do.
Sorry, it's rare that I see something that I read all the time and.
Yeah, that's why I thought this was so interesting too.
So the whole point of tzitzit, according to what we read every day, is to not have wanton sex, to not have with people that we shouldn't be having.
I know. I think that zonim is now used that way, but I think it really just means to not go against the mitzvot that you should remember by seeing the tzitzit. So if you read,
just a for example,
this is just, well, that's why I don't love the fact that they use the word lustful. But yes, I mean
right, because going after your heart and your eyes could be a good thing also.
Right, that's what I was, exactly. Well, and that's what they were being told to do in the land, right? So I think when we read the third paragraph of the Shema on a daily basis, and we read this, what we're thinking about is we should see the tzitzit that we wear, whether all the time or while we're praying, and we should be able to think about the fact that there are mitzvot that we should hold on to all the time during the day, no matter if we're really focused on them or not, by looking down and saying like, oh, I should behave differently. Now, I hope that worked, right? There are many people that wear tzitzit who still do things that we wouldn't want them to do, and there are maybe many people who don't wear tzitzit who do wonderful things in the world. So it's clearly not a foolproof method, but the idea here, when looking at it in the text itself, I think it is getting at this, like, you could be drawn to do things that you should not want to do, or definitely shouldn't do according to my mitzvot.
That you should put a stop. This is
correct. Correct. But in the daily practice of reading this, I think it's more so just, you should be reminded that there are mitzvot that you should be following, and these are the signs that you should have to be that visual reminder.
I guess I read it all the time. I didn't know how specific it was.
Yeah, Alan.
Well, there's another reason to wear tzitzit other than to make sure you don't have lustful thoughts.
No, not lustful thoughts. It's
or lustful actions prevent you from doing wrong things.
Interesting. It's assuming you're going to have lustful thoughts, and it's saying have lustful thoughts. That's fine. This is a reminder of when to follow those thoughts and when not to.
Yeah, but one of the primary reasons to wear tzitzit, at least in the rabbinic mind, is certainly going to be to zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim. And it's for that reason, for example, that, there was a discussion, we talk about it on Pesach. Why is it that we say this paragraph at night? Because if it's just tzitzit that we wear during the day, if that's the main focus, then there's no reason, this is Ben Zoma in there about what was going on, then there's no reason to be able to say that third paragraph of the Shema at night, if that's the primary focus. But because the focus is Yitziat Mitzrayim, which happens, you remember it, day and night, Kol Yemei Hayecha, the days and the nights.
I've never heard that tzitzit are connected to Yetziat Mitzrayim. But it's possible that it's connected to, like, that there's a midrash about that. It's very possible. But I think the general understanding of tzitzit is that it's connected to all mitzvot, of which that is definitely one of them, to remember Yetziat Mitzrayim. And so it's possible that, and that was kind of the point that I was making to Sandra, that there's definite reason to connect this to those lustful urges, especially when we're reading in opposite the spies and where we kind of are in our narrative of the Torah, but also to just on a daily basis to be able to recognize things like Yetziat Mitzrayim and all these other mitzvot that we wouldn't necessarily remember walking down the street to go to Glattmart, but then if you see tzitzit, right, although going through Glattmart, you might think about Yetziat Mitzrayim a little bit. But just this idea of the mitzvot that you should hold on to be able to do well in the world. Okay, I said that I didn't have enough material, and then I said that I was going to rush through, and here we are. So I just want to read two more things that we have on this sheet. I'm glad this was interesting for everybody. So Rashi at the bottom of the page, I'm just going to read through it, and then I would love to hear your thoughts. The verb taturu has the same meaning in Numbers 13:25, which I just brought in the earlier use of it, but it's the same idea. It's the same spies story. The heart and the eyes are the spies of the body. They act as its agents for sinning. The eyes see, the heart covets, and the body commits the sin. So this is getting back to what Sandra's saying, is that when you read these two stories together, it's easy to connect these two moments, one being a passage we know very well and one being a story that we know pretty well, that this idea of scouting could be that we are making sure not to do that scouting all the time, and that we should have these visual reminders that it's very easy and very possible for us, because we're human beings, to, and really just animals in general, right, to do that, but to be able to hold ourselves to mitzvot, which of course we can list tons of mitzvot that go against having those kinds of thoughts and urges, and as Sandra was saying, like, it's not bad to have them, it's just there needs to be a time and a place and a reason and a person and all those kinds of things to act on them, right? But there's no problem with them, just like there's no problem touring a land, but there might be if you're going to come and conquer it, right? There might be reason behind your actions that needs to be kind of tamed. Yeah.
So, and I told you I'd raise my hand.
That's great. Yeah.
So, like, to go out looking for it.
Yeah.
To go out looking for it.
Yeah.
So that's perhaps even a better translation.
Totally, and I think in that case, it's a great thing for the scouts, right? I mean, not so great for the people who were scouting, I guess. But for us, on this side of things, it was great that we went into a land to scout it out, because we knew what we were up against. But right, the way that Rashi is explaining it is that there is something about a human being doing that kind of scouting that doesn't feel like the right way to go about. Right, exactly, yeah.
Are they is God asking them to act logically, or just?
Who's the they?
God, or is, Moshe?
Sorry, I'm just not getting all the pronouns.
The scouts, are the scouts being asked to act logically, or they just not to act on their heart and emotions?
Yeah, because, right, yes, it's a really good
say
question.
them explicitly to say, act logically, act something that makes sense, it's just don't act on your emotions, or...
Right, so these are two very different passages and moments in this parsha, but yeah, in the scout story, everything is very logical, right? Because it's all for this moment of then being able to take over the land and know what's in it. When we get to the passage that's later on in chapter 15, when we get to this idea of wearing the tzitzit, it has less to do with logic and more to do with emotions. Okay. So it's using the same words, but in two very different ways, yeah.
I think there's a different context that I see it in.
Yeah.
These are slaves. They're going to conquer anything. The tzitzit gives them the idea of reminding them that God promised that you're going to have this land there. That's what the purpose of it is. Not
so
that
maybe because they still have
a bunch of spies going on tours, they're going to go molest the people who commit crimes in the area. They're just there to observe because they probably didn't think they would ever do it. Moshe screwed up and said, go see it, instead of letting a bunch of spies take fortified cities that never fought anything without God's help. And they weren't ready, and they died out till the next generation comes. So that's my whole thesis.
Yeah, it's possible that because they have that slave mentality, they need more reminders and more like bumpers in a bowling alley to keep themselves doing what they need to be doing as now members of a people who have rules and laws and mitzvot, as we would call it.
I speak to Moshe every week. You know, that's what it is.
Okay, I want to read one more.
God, I don't speak to him. I think that's you.
Wait, hold on. I want to read one more passage, and then if there are a few more comments, we can take them before we finish. So the last passage on the second side. If you want to read the Sefer Chinuch, you're more than welcome to. But I'm going to read this modern piece from 2006. Well, 2006 has come up a lot today. So 2006 by Alan Cook, and he says, there's a mosquito in my face. Okay. It seems that this Sidra is all about seeing, what we choose to see and what we ignore. Caleb and Yehoshua, we didn't talk about them, but they come after this, or as part of really this scout's story, saw the beauty of the land. The remaining spies could see only obstacles that stood in the way of the Israelites taking possession of the land. And the Israelites themselves, who heard the spies' reports, were blinded by their fear of the unknown, rather than being open to the opportunities that would be afforded to them as they enjoyed freedom in a land that had been promised to their ancestors. So similar to what Rabbi was saying. By contrast, the tzitzit require us to have our eyes open to appreciate them. And in so doing, we are reminded of God's mitzvot and of the kindness that God showed to us in redeeming us from Egypt. There you go, Alan. We can go through our lives with blinders before our eyes, refusing to bear witness to God's graciousness towards us. Or we can open eyes that have previously been blind and proclaim, Ashreinu, that's never happened to me before, that's very funny. Ashreinu, how greatly have we been blessed. So that's bringing together these two different pieces here in a kind of a modern take, a modern read on this. And it's nice that it brought in your commentaries as well. To have this idea that we need to not only have reminders that there are good things coming to us or things that we could avail ourselves of if we were able to see everything, but that there are also things that we need to open our eyes to that are not so great as reminders for ways that we can heal and ways that we can make things better and ways that we can be open to that kind of change. So I thought this was a very interesting connector piece to bring at the end of this, and I'll hear what Alan has to say and then we can move on.
Right. The citation that you gave about tzitzit, and which is the third paragraph of the Shema, didn't include the final verse of the Shema, which specifically deals with Yetziat Mitzrayim. It says, Ani Hashem Elohim Eshevte Mitzrayim. And so, and that's why that this paragraph, rabbinically, is viewed as this is to remind us of Yetziat Mitzrayim each and every day, which is why we say it in the morning and at night.
Right, I've just never heard that tzitzit specifically, like the fringes were connected to Yetziat Mitzrayim as a reminder. I obviously know that the paragraph itself has Yetziat Mitzrayim in it. No, but the idea of the reminder, I think, in general, in enabling us to have a visual reminder, which some of us need and some of us don't need. But if you are a visual learner, a visual person, having some kind of reminder that even if you're not going to say, oh, right, these tzitzit, what are the 613 mitzvot again, right? You have this idea of somehow being connected to a lifestyle of mitzvot, of which remembering the fact that we were once slaves and that we were then redeemed should be a mindset for us to be able to walk in the world.
I'm thinking more about the actual third paragraph itself and what it means rather than just tzitzit, because everyone thinks that tzitzit, that whole paragraph, the primary focus of it is tzitzit. But in the rabbinic mind, no, the primary purpose of the paragraph is Yetziat Mitzrayim.
I was just, this is gonna take us too far afield, but every time that the Torah or the Tanakh talks about something sexual explicitly, or relatively explicitly, desire, sharing, anything, the rabbis always make it about something else.
That is true. And on that note,
you have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.